Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that is joining us either through Zoom or through LinkedIn Live. Much appreciated for your time. Also to those of you that will look at this recording after the session. We are extremely thankful for the interest, the commitment, the questions that you have submitted throughout the last 4 months. This is going to be our last session. So I have a couple of logistic items to check with you before we start with our last lecture and conversation around the future of development. First of all, I want to apologize to you because we had to reschedule this last class, partially because we needed to seize also the opportunity of being able to engage with many of you and other people interested in these topics in a few countries, as we were participating either of conferences or events, and we had the opportunity to engage with many people in the Governance Explorers Network interested in bringing these kind of conversations to their own groups, organizations, and constituencies. So just to give you a sense, in the last month, it has been an intense month in which we were in Colombia for the first transitioning conference of transitioning from fossil fuels conference in Santa Marta, where we had the opportunity of participating on a panel and also co-organizing with this amazing organization called Movilizatorio, a conversation called Confluence at the end of the conference. We were in Zambia. We originally went for RightsCon. As many of you know, RightsCon was canceled last minute. But we still went. We had a commitment already and had been engaging with action in Zambia around climate governance. We were able to engage with a large number of local stakeholders in Zambia, but also with a fair number of activists, climate activists, and we had one of these classes, one master classes on climate governance over there. We were only just last week in Morocco. First of all, as part of the On Think Tank conferences, and we had the opportunity of interacting with several think tanks working in the climate space in particular, but also with students at the School of Collective Intelligence in Rabat, as per an invitation of their director, Lex Paulson, to talk about rethinking democracy and the future of development. So it has been busy, but at the same time, I regret that we haven't been able to wrap things up with this cohort of the course. Of course, there are going to be many other opportunities, hopefully, for us to interact, to apply many of the conversations that we had. We'll talk about next steps and what we have been learning over the last 4 months. So this session, friends, is very much about re-engaging with you, sharing some of the thoughts that you have shared with us on, in any ways, how to apply many of the frameworks that we have been discussing, considering throughout the last 4 months. So I really hope that you find it useful, that the course in general has informed the work that you do, hopefully, in the present or in the future, or at least ignited some uncomfortable conversations about what we do and how can we do it better. It is important. It is important that we remain humble, but at the same time ambitious in terms of what we do, because what we do as a community is important. So without further ado, let's start a little bit discussing about the future of development and the architecture of durability. So first of all, big shout out to at least some of our participants. We will have the opportunity for questions and answers, of course, in a moment. I see a hand from Cayona. Cayona, please, if you want to ask a question, please go ahead. Oh, I guess that I saw a hand. Maybe it was a mistake. Oh, by the way, I want to introduce Alessandra Granelli. Thank you, Alessandra, for joining us. Alessandra is going to be checking the chat the Q&A section, and she's going to be bringing it to my attention also because sometimes between my notes and the PowerPoint, I cannot see when somebody has raised their hand. So I apologize if there's a delay there. But we want and we encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. There's no problem. We'll stop. We'll also leave some time, especially if we haven't had many questions, for Q&A midway. And then we would like to have a break of 5 minutes in between so we can cover the whole 90 minutes of the session. There's one more logistical detail that I forget before, because it may be the case that some of you have to leave halfway or towards the end. Okay. One other thing that has been complex because of all this traveling for us, right, like, is to actually release to you the exam, right, like the questionnaire that we were proposing to you before getting certificates, right? So we're very happy to do that, of course, and you will receive it this week. It has been hard for me to wrap that up, partially because we do not want to give you an exam, right? Like, that's not the point. The point is not like asking you what is the future of development, or like define a strategy, or these kind of things. You can do very well that just doing research on the internet, asking ChatGPT, like a number of things. That's not the point. The point is for the exercise to be useful in framing a little bit the work that you do or that you would like to do in the future, right? Using the tools of the course. So we want to be a bit more intentional on that, because potentially those answers to your exam, right? Like, if you allow us to do it, if you are interested in us doing it, like, we want to also use them to frame the conversation looking at the future because of the other products that are going to come under the project in the second half of the year. And I'll present a little bit about that in a moment. So in the end, do we have any questions, Ale?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Oh, I see that Kayona, it said a moment ago, sorry, I can turn my mic on.
Okay, just 1 sec.
So maybe turn it on and then we'll see. Kayona, are you there? Let us know if it is in any case something on our side or your side.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Sorry about that. My audio was not connecting for a little bit. Um, but yes, so my question was just that, and you answered it sort of. It was about when we will have the exam, or like the little wrap-up quiz.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was my question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I imagine that that was going to be your question too. Thank you so much for reminding us about that. Yes, I mean, like, now that I'm here, I arrived actually from Morocco on Monday night. I can dedicate the time to just wrap things up and just release, because obviously we don't want that much time to pass after the course to send that. But hopefully the tool is something that you will find useful too. And we're very happy actually to receive feedback about this. I mean, like, as everything that is in this class, even that is experimental in many ways. So let's start this journey then, to try to wrap up, to bring some um, substance and synthesize a little bit what we have been discussing. Okay, so hopefully you can follow me. So first of all, I mean, like, I'm not going to insist or go much over here, especially in the first sessions. I told you a little bit about who we are and what are we trying to accomplish here, right? Like, we're the Governance Action Hub, right? We are an accelerator for coalitions of change, especially in the governance around some of the most complex challenges of our time. We work in international development. Personally, I have over 20, and much more than 20 by now, years of experience in international development. And I'm very critical of the way that we have been doing things, in case you didn't notice, during the last semester. So, of course, development has many issues currently, right? Like, and it's even more noticeable since last year. But it's also true that we had several issues in the way that we did our work for over the years because of how the system in which we are embedded works. It's not our fault individually, but collectively, it is our responsibility to look at ways to change it, to make it better, regardless of where we sit. There are tons of issues related to power, to positioning, to the status quo that do not allow many of the very promising, maybe evidence-backed technical solutions that we have been exploring over the years to actually deliver the results that we expect them to result or to lead to on one hand, but also, right, like to help or be conducive to results that actually last, right, to the issue of durability. So the way that we approach really this governance in general and governance in the areas of development more generally, but also specifically climate or democracy, right, is that really governance is not about the structure, the organigram, and so, but governance is very much a journey and exploration, right, in unknown waters, especially when we are willing to acknowledge that most of the work that we do in general is embedded in a system where there are different and very deep trench power relationships, local politics to consider, and so. So what we're trying to look at this is basically organize the work around a democracy exploration and a climate action exploration, right? When we are very much focusing on influence, on agency, on owning and belonging, right? Like in these processes, how is it that people can actually take these processes and truly own them over time? We'll talk a little bit about that. So the whole point is about finding ways to act collectively, like to tackle these systemic challenges, but not with a romantic view of collective work or collective action, right? But actually a very strategic point of view and perspective on collective action. So we started actually this journey, like looking at this system of development in which we are truly embedded, right? Like where we have the work organized around mainly projects, right? Where we have these periods of 2, 3, maybe if you're lucky, 5-year periods of time for funding, cycles of funding. That most of the times while the funding flows, you see changes. You're going to see changes because investments are going to be made, the trainings are going to be delivered, etc., right? Like, but where after a while, what you see is that success mirage, in a way, that has been generated during the grant funding injected, tends to over time, once the funding is out, once the consultants are out, once the workshops stop and all, boom, bring us down for several reasons, right, to what will be that equilibrium of poverty, of education, or anything else that we may want to discuss over here. Appropriate governance, democracy, right, or climate action, etc. So one of the things that we have been discussing is that sometimes, right, and what is a different way to do things where we're actually building or rather sharing capacity in a way that local organizations are able, right, like to go through this systemic scaffolding, right, that is more sustainable over time. Even though the amounts of fund, especially in the short term, may not be as dramatic as in the original model. Okay, interventions evaporate through, in a way, right? Like what I'm trying or what we have discussed is how true progress requires building relational tissue that outlasts the funding cycle. So how is it that we move from these aid complex, right, that we have been living in for decades, really, into a framework of reclaiming development? This is not about a battle, by the way, between people in Washington versus people in Nairobi, or people in Nairobi versus people in a particular province within Kenya. Okay, so this is not a fight or just trying to like call attention on like how is it that everything should be localized. Localization is extremely important. We have discussed it over here. The whole point is that how is it that we can work together to actually lead to results that are not only more impactful, but also more sustainable over time, right? And here, what I'm trying is to contrast, right? We have discussed all this, right? Because the way that we look typically, or we have been looking typically at development, right? Like through like this view of poverty of lack of money and resources, right? Like to in a framework of reclaiming development, more about this dynamic equilibrium of exclusion, which also is reflected, of course, in lack of money, but also in many other things, right? Like so, and the limitation in many ways of the own indicators that we typically use, right? Like in which we may lose track of like things as vulnerability, for example, of households, right? If our objective is just to bring income-wise like a household out of poverty, but we lose out of sight what happens if the program ends or there's a new administration, etc., and how we may have seen that that household may be over the poverty line but vulnerable. This lack of predictability, right, like this vulnerability over time generates a number of other problems and inequalities too, and sustains inequalities at the local level. This idea of strategic design from like these reports and 2, 3, 5 year projects, right? Toward other frameworks like direct improvisation that we saw from John Yang, right? Like or public missions in Mariana Mazzucato and others, right? Like what is the role of the practitioner from somebody that is basically a compliance manager, right? Like just implementing what the project says that we're gonna do, because this way we satisfy also the donor or our manager at the same time, to one where while we are doing our job and what is within our control, right? Like we have a view, a world view of a system architect, right? One where we go from a view of data, right, as neutral metrics, right? Like we're actually like a true political battleground where we see issues of how the same type of information is used or interpreted in a different way, right? Like as a reflection of local polarization, for example, right? And how is it that we define ultimately success in development? Is it about the project completion based on what we said that we were going to do, right? Like, or is it about durable community agency? And if you remember class 2, right? Like what we discussed about when we talk about the history of development, right? Like we observe how very much the limited goals that we have set for our space over time, that discussion about poverty and inequality or growth, right? And how what is it that we should focus on first, had very much limited also the types of tools that we have been exploring and using in the development space for decades. And very much how this uneasy compromise of the late 90s and then the diversity of goals that we have seen expanding around climate, around democracy and agency, and many other things in development over the last 20 to 25 years have also translated in a different approach about the tools that are at our that we can use to actually tackle or pursue those goals. In many ways, when we enlarge the ambition of our goals, right, like we open the opportunity for people that are willing to create, willing to explore different ways of doing things, to also generate, build, explore, test new tools that allow us to move forward. We saw this, for example, on issues related to climate, right? Like how multilateral banks are looking at swaps between them to create some budget space that they can release and work with projects multi-country, or how a particular NGO at the local level may actually be able to work with other partners that bring other skills to, for example, complement or enhance microfunding, microfinance programs at the local level, right? Like in a way that they respond better to the needs and the challenges of local communities or to social structures, for example, limitations based on caste, for example, in rural areas of South Asia. So, very much, this is just a reminder, I didn't make this up. Okay, so it's like this is not like Mario said, like let's just build a course about this and let's just bring all these cool concepts, right? And see if people catch on to them. This is very much an effort of trying to bring together several intellectual inspirations, not of my own, but like that are out there. People that are actually trying to defy precisely the status quo or the way that we typically approach economics and the typical way in which we approach international development more generally. So the only thing that we're trying to do is just to try to bring a little bit many of these perspectives to the table together, right? And try to see how they connect with each other in a way that makes sense. And we have proposed you a strategic framework that picks up on the inspirations of many of these people. Mission-oriented work of Mariano Mazzucato, right? Like the ideas of boundaries and how to push them in Yuan Eng, right? Like concepts like direct improvisation, right? Like how they challenge the mental structures that we have in the way that things should work, like over time. Like before them, Eleanor Armstrong, right? Like in the way in which she is talking about governance polycenters, right? Like in particular. But also issues related to the friction, right? Like Seth Godin is not somebody that works in development. He actually works in marketing, but he has been working on a different way to look at strategies, right? Like not plans in the end, but a close understanding, a strong understanding of why is it that we do something, why and not a different thing. And a lot of like how we organize the different steps that we're proposing here to you, like come very much from that definition of a strategy, but also translated, adapted, right? Like to this course of people like Duncan Green, right? And for years have been talking about how change actually happens, right? And the importance of political economy. So this may be actually the most difficult mental structure to give up. Most of us have lived our careers, right, as if we were project managers. Have nothing against project managers, right, by itself, right? Like in the end, I mean, like when you are managing a project, you're just trying to take like a series of activities to good port, right? Like because you are betting in a way, or you have been able to convince somebody that the implementation of those activities are going to lead to an important result, whatever it is that you work. Okay, but it becomes also a mentality, and a mentality that can limit us in many ways. First, because it's a reflection of the world where we live, right? Like where most of the funding is based or built around projects, right? And those projects are expected to deliver, assuming that there have been like risks or assumptions that have been overcome, and for which we typically, when we present our plan or our theory of change, right? We are typically non-responsible for. And the truth is that in international development, individually and collectively, right, like we don't take enough responsibility. And that is a problem. Okay. So now what is the difference between the compliance manager and the system architect, right? Like the system architect, this construct, right? Like if you want this persona, right? Like is more interested in looking at human behavior and the incentives of the different players in a system, right? Like what are the power dynamics? Because you're going to have to deal with them, right? Or you should deal with them or consider them unless in the implementation of your work, right? Like if you want like the work that you are doing, that you believe in, right? Like to have a larger, more durable effect too, beyond the cycle of the funding. Second is an understanding that every intervention is deeply political, right? Like it's not only about elections, right? Like it's the way that the players operate within an environment. How is it that people like, right, to keep their own status? We talk about this when we challenge the concept that humans are rational, right? Like which is deeply embedded in the work that we have been doing development for decades. Right? And finally, recognizing, right, that in the end, development and reclaiming development, right, like is a messy, a collaborative human endeavor. We cannot do it alone because the challenges are complex. Okay? So how is it that we shift the system and own the power? We talk about strategies, right? Like not as a to-do list or a plan, right? Like, but a strategy describing why Not how, but why are we choosing one particular path over another, right? A process in which, right, like, while we may understand that context matters, right, we move from that platitude, right, like to map that context that is relevant to the goal that we are pursuing, not to the program that we are trying to implement, but to the goal that we are pursuing, right? Um, who is defining the problem, right? Like who benefits from that status quo currently, right? Like, because then we can understand who may block us over time, directly, indirectly, willingly, evil with evil or not, right? Like, um, what are the potential strategic levers that we can use? Do we need a narrative shift? Do we need a coalition building? Do we need policy change? Do we need a different data infrastructure and translation? Right? All of the above, right? And then understanding what are our constraints and how do we work through them over time. So then budget cuts, right, like are a real, important, difficult constraint, right? But the point is that in the environment where we are, if we are expecting the budget cuts, what is it that we still can do to keep the momentum going, to keep the opportunity for results to actually happen, right? Like for overcoming the problem of political turnover. How is it that we can please stop saying in our reports, like the program went well, but then the election results changed everything? We knew that there were going to be elections for 4 years, or 5 or 6, depending on the country, right? Like, we could not have seen, or maybe we could, like the closing of USAID, but we knew that we were dependent. What can we do about it now that we have to, like, find other ways? How are people dealing with this? How is it that we can explore ways out, ways to move forward, way more to move forward in a better way, right? Like collaboratively, as a collective, as a group. And how to overcome public mistrust, right? Like lack of trust we saw is extremely important issue, right? Like because also in the end, that trust is out there. It's not there because of living experience. Somebody messed up before, something wrong happened in the past. And also, right, like there is mistrust that can be leveraged by those precisely that do not want to block any activities that we are proposing that we would like to pursue. So how is it that we counter that narrative? These things are important. And one last point about trust, because we discussed this, but I don't know if I frame it in this way. We tend to treat trust as something that we have to build before implementing a project. We need people to trust us or to trust other players, right? Like, so things actually work. And we forget that probably like the most effective way to build trust is by doing things, precisely by engaging, by having difficult conversations, right? Like recently I remember my good friend Cherry from Accountability Lab saying this, for example, at a major global conference, right? Like, and I feel that he's right, she's right on point. So in the end, how is it that we ask a few questions, and then based on that, we decide what is it that we can do individually or in our organization, but also what is it that we could do with others, right? And this question in the end informs the strategy that we can build on pursuing collaboration with others. Who do we need to work with? How is it that we do our outreach? If you must build a development initiative that survives 10 years across political cycles, climate shocks, what is the foundation? What is the narrative power, the data, the revenue, the community ownership, the laws and regulations needed? And who do we need to work with to make those happen? And in this context, in this discussion, right, like stakeholders are not something to be just mapped, right, or listed, right? Like, but we need to approach stakeholder identification and mapping, right? Like based on a few concrete questions, right? Like if we already define the problem by ourselves or with others, right? Like who is affected by that problem, right? Like who is it in the end that ultimately we want to benefit? because that's going to challenge us beyond just the check in a plan of a project implementation, and implementation of certain activities. And this is very important for the narrative in the end. Who must be brought on board? Who is it that we need as allies, but also identify who may actually block us, who may be neutral too, and we still need them on board because their support will be key for the work that we're trying to do, and what we're trying to achieve. But then the question that most of the times we completely forget, right? Like, why will those people join in? Why will those people support us, right? If we don't understand what the incentives of the different players are, right? Like, it's going to be very hard to engage them in an effective way. And this includes, by the way, communities and community members. So in the end, historically, most of our reform efforts, again, individually working on a small NGO or working in a big organization, a multilateral development bank and all, like the challenges are surprisingly similar. And first of all, because most of our reform efforts are still trapped at the surface level. Right? Like, this was our introduction to systems. One of the things that we have been trying to emphasize in this global course is to try to make systems real. The books out there that talk about system thinking and how to approach it for social development, right, are excellent, and they give you all these fantastic models, amazing graphs, etc. But it very much is still missing, right, at all levels, practical ways to deal with it, right? How far we can go, identifying what are the relevant systems, and all. And this is practice. This is not just I know or you know or you don't know, okay? Or just follow this graph that Mario gave you in a class some years ago, a few years ago. No. It's very much about adapting and understanding how this connects, all right, what of these elements are relevant to the kind of work or the kind of sector or the kind of or the country where you're working. Okay? How is it that progressively we can move from just a work on parameters, right? Like towards other segments of the system, right? This is a simplification of the system ladder, right? Of Donella Meadows. Okay. So again, while the parameters change, the deeper structures of the system remain entirely untouched, right? So how is it that we move from incremental change to structural transformation, right? Like we need strategy, right? Across multiple levels. And for that, we're going to need to work with others. And here comes the whole discussion about collaboration. First, one key concept, right? Like as a reminder, the idea of minimal viable action. Minimal viable action, right? Like is our way individually or as an organization, but also collectively, right? With the coalition that we start building, of coordinating specific action that is under our control, things that we can do because of our skills, our expertise, right? Our position in the system, right? That may introduce some changes to the status quo. So, like, this is not theoretical. We're going to talk a little bit about some examples of like what we have been seeing over the last few months, but also there are many other efforts at national, local, international level even, where people are actually actively trying to do this. So this is not just let's do something small, right? Like to show that like there is but to have a demonstration effect, right? Like these are kind of efforts also that show that change is possible. And if we are able to complement or coordinate, it's not the same, right? Like our actions with actions of others, like the potential effect at the system level is larger. Okay? What is a minimal viable action? Maybe a low risk experiment, right? Where you can have a hyperlocal action or a specific action that is testing human behavior in real time. It can be about behavioral prototyping, discovering these operational truths that top-down decrees ignore. It may be about relational tissue, right? Like how is it that we build the structural trust needed to withstand changing political winds? How is it that we're doing it over time? Again, like change doesn't happen through a bureaucrat signing a massive decree, right? It actually happens by executing small strategic wedges that split open closed systems. A bit more about this. So remember, right, like these MBAs, these minimal viable actions, may be individual, right, or at the organizational level. These great things that each person, each member of a potential coalition, let's say, right, like can actually do, right, within their existing mandate. And that sometimes they are bets that you are taking, right, where you're showing goodwill also to the other players, the other potential members of the coalition, or the key stakeholders that you're going to have to work with at the local level. But then you have the collective MBAs, right? Like, regardless if what you have is a group of organizations that are exploring doing something or coordinating action, right? Like, or you have a well-established alliance or coalition, right, for changes. How is it that the different actions, the different individual MBAs, right, like interlock, right, when executed together and potentially have a bit of more of an effect, and how they can support each other and generate a larger impact. And this finally leads us to the discussion of a reform coalition. Okay, we cannot do this alone, or we can, and we could try. But the truth is that, especially for complex challenges, right? Like, I mean, maybe if the problem is very specific, identified, right? It's a last mile problem, etc. I mean, that's perfectly fine. Maybe your organization is well suited to just do things on your own and just show how you are like going and completing that last mile in development. Good, great, do it. Nobody's saying not do it. But then when you start thinking about what is it that we need in terms of support or coordination for these results that may be good right now to actually last over time, then the question and perspective changes. It may also change like the kind of people that you work with. Maybe you have been coordinating work with other NGOs or friendly think tanks or other academics, right? Or I don't know, a government agency, right? Like, but the question is like, how is it that we are even able to engage into a coalition people that we may disagree with, people that we may not even trust in the beginning, but that we know that are important for sustaining and enhancing results over time. Deep system change is never a solo endeavor. Okay? So coalitions can provide the necessary leverage to overcome resistance, right? From entrenched interests, holding the current paradigm in place. Where is it that private companies in the Philippines may actually be important and instrumental in their engagement with civil society at the local, the grassroots level even, right? Like to stop efforts to just extract minerals or potentially affect water sources in rural Philippines. That doesn't mean that alliance or that a moment in which these interests align is going to last forever. But it could be the first step. It could be a leverage, right? That can be used over time. It is an opportunity. What can we do about it? So here is where it comes, right? Maybe like we need to connect directly, indirectly, formally, informally, right? Like those social movements with communities, with political entrepreneurs, with institutional insiders. How is it that we build this in a way that is not threatening? We have been experimenting with this over the last 2 years. It has not been easy. It has not been straightforward. It can work. Okay? So the point here is that in the end, system change emerges through iterative sequence reform. This is not a line. This is not a straight line. In a way, it shouldn't. you should be actually concerned if the results and things are working really well based on your linear plan. Something is probably cooking there. So the point is that how is it that we start moving from our work, which typically focus on parameters, right, at the external section of systems, right? And then it starts involving rules, laws, institutional learning, narrative shifts, right? All into paradigm transformation. Some point in this class, we talked about the importance of Overton windows, right? And we saw that there are two things with Overton windows, right? Like either we work to be able to seize them, right? We're ready to seize them when they appear, right? Because change, the possibility or the openness for change may be happening over time. And then the other approach is like, how is it that we work on building that Overton window, that opportunity for change at a systemic level? And here, finally, before we do a break, and I'm gonna ask a few questions from you, right? Like, I'm gonna stop for the chat questions and perspectives, right? Like, is this idea ultimately of many complex challenges in development very much as infinite games? On one hand, we look at infinite games when if you are not trying to solve the problem, but you're just trying to keep the game going. And we even saw it in the context of the discussion about corruption, for example, in state capture. But one of the things that I have been throwing out there is that in many ways, right, like development is not a game that we win. It's not a final game. Even when we have seen progress, even when we have seen results that are promising or very good or perceived as sustainable, right? Like there is going to be a next iteration, right? Those results are going to be fragile in many ways. And one of the best ways to make sure that the results that are being embedded, that exist, that are out there, can be sustained is that if they don't depend on us. Then if we go away, we change jobs, we lose the next funding cycle, we start doing something else because in the end we have to sustain our families, right? Like the work is owned by other people, not by us, because those people that are right there at the center of the action, right? Like they deem those results and the work that we did with them like so important that they will not let go. And that sits at the intersection of going beyond ownership, right? Like this is deeper than ownership. It involves a sense of belonging, right? How is it that you are part of the solution, part of the implementation, right? And the opportunities for active engagement. Most of the times when we think about participation, right? Like most of the work that we do or that has been done in the past, regardless if you're a small NGO or the World Bank, okay? Because we have seen this. The focus has been in the creation of the spaces for participation. But they are not even 5% probably of the solution. The key thing is that what is an active space for if it doesn't show that it works for the people, not for you, not for show to your donor, right? But for the people that you're trying to benefit. How is it that people sense or have a sense of belonging to this and ownership so they actually want to keep it, regardless of what happens? I'm proud, probably shouldn't be, right? Like one of the projects that we had in Peru and that we started our World Week with in one region in Peru, I don't have any more resources to sustain it in one of those regions, right? Like we have been able to find additional resources in other regions though, and we are working in those other regions. But guess what? The work and the people that we engage in that original region, it continues and they keep organizing themselves. They stay connected, right? Like it's not as active as before because there is the lack of additional investment probably from outside. But especially in times like this when the regional elections are approaching, it becomes very active because the trust has been built. I wish that I could help them more, for example. But at least I feel that we left something that is lasting. I should not just think that that is just going to happen just because, right? Like they will still eventually need additional support and help. or alliances with other players. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a moment because I talk a lot, obviously, but actually I want to elicit a few comments from here, from the table. You see, for example, that I mentioned Mabato, Anuradha, Victor, Riley, because these are just examples of people that have participating at some point of this class. I don't even know if you guys are around. Maybe you are not today, okay? I see Anuradha, right? Like, I see Victor. Okay, I don't see Mabato. But at least those. But it could be Kayona, it could be Laura, it could be anybody, right? Like, I will stop here and I want you, while I look at other questions and comments that you have put out there, um, and Victor, great if you could, but also this is an open invitation for everybody in the room. If you could share like something that particularly has either shocked, inspire you, or make you uncomfortable during the different sessions that you have attended during the semester, I will very much appreciate if you could share that with us, with the group. Please, if you don't mind, go ahead. Anybody in the room, please. In the meantime, I'm going to be looking at the Q&A and the chat. Ale?
Not yet, but everybody, if you want to share your experience, please raise your hand and I can unmute you. Thank you.
Victor, I saw a few comments from you on the chat. Is it possible for you to talk? If not, just write, and what I can do is actually I can read some of your comments on the chat. I see your hand went up. Maybe Ale, if you can open the mic for Victor, for Anu too, just in case she can participate after. Victor, go
Thank
ahead.
you. Thank you very much, Mario. I would first like to thank you and everyone else that this course has really been great in terms of redefining how we view development, collaboration, how we address systemic structures in pushing for change. And this has had a direct impact because, as I said, when I started off in this program, it was just at the moment when I was redesigning my career path. And I'm moving right now to study in, so I want to go into development because I'm involved in so much of activism in the area of climate change mitigation and also integration through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And so through the concepts that I've learned in this class on how to collaborate with people, because at the end of the day, we need to work with different diverse skills, diverse personalities, so that we achieve common results. It's been a great journey for me, I would say. And if possible, if there is a way that we can, continue working together. You've mentioned a model that is going to continue keeping us collaborating and sharing ideas. That would really be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victor, for sharing that. I mean, I'm glad that this has been helpful. So one of the things that I have been doing, obviously, I cannot do like all the time and all, but I want you and others to know, right, like that. I have been trying to look a little bit about what you are doing also, right? Like following LinkedIn, for example. I promise I'm not stalking you guys. But I am very interested in seeing how many of the people that are joining this class are looking at the issues or what are the kind of issues they are working on. And we will be very interested and we'll have a bit of an opportunity for this. Anybody, right, that wants to or that is looking at the same kind of questions, right? Like we're going to invite you after this course, right? You're going to receive in the coming couple of weeks an invitation to join an online group, right, that are looking at that particular problem. We have designed these spaces under the portal for people to come together and start collaborating if they choose to. We'll generate some incentives to do so, and like in some key tools, right? Like, and depending on the interest, we will also provide a facilitator, right, that is able to help you in that journey. The point is that how is it that potentially collaborative with somebody that you have never met before, right? Like, but that is working in similar things in a different geography or maybe in your own country and that you don't know, right? Like, is somebody that you can connect with on a particular and spark a particular idea. And if that idea is validated by the group, right? Like, there may be also opportunities for at least testing it over time. Okay, so I'll mention a bit more about this. So I'm going to pass it to Anurada, but I just noticed, Anurada, thank you, and I'm sorry I didn't see the comment that you're not feeling well, so that's why you're listening a bit passively. Just in case I see that your mic is open, but if you are not feeling well, please do not worry at all, right? I can actually comment on some of your questions in the chat box. Okay, so interrupt me in any case. But yeah, I appreciate. I see. Final text will be sent to all fellow. I have written an email, yes, etc. Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing yourself too. Okay, so since Anurada, I know that she can't, but also anybody else that would like to participate or like say a little bit about something that particularly caught your attention or that you disagree with, that's perfectly fine too. I mean, like that will be very helpful for us also thinking on future iterations. I see a comment of Laura. So I'm gonna read it, and Laura, if you wanna add to it, please feel free, right? Like for me, the session on the energy transition with the example of Colombia was very inspiring. It remains a lingering, ongoing issue for me how to push for such transitions in environments, political climates that are less friendly and open to this kind of change at this moment, or even how to work on this on a smaller local levels. I cannot tell right now. No, that's perfectly fine, Laura. And I guess that's the point, right? Like when you start opening opportunities, that is gonna show and bring the idea of like, oh, look, this kind of work, like finding the others, building coalitions, pushing for the issues, it is possible, right? But the challenges, all right, that different contexts are gonna bring about, right, are real. The point is that that may inform a different ways to approach collaborative work because probably you need other kind of allies. Sometimes the allies can actually come also from abroad. One of the reasons why we insist also in the potential, not only for building coalitions within a particular country, right, of people that are looking at the same challenge, let's say, like these groups in Peru that I was mentioning before, right, is that sometimes what you need is some allies outside of the country too that may actually motivate a conversation from abroad, right, about what is happening or the opportunity. And it also has to do with the fact that while we need to be brave, obviously, and speak truth to power when we can, when it is not possible because it is dangerous, right? Potentially can become dangerous, right? Like the strategy may need to be different to show what is possible. I cannot give you the answer, of course, because it will probably depend on each place, right? Like, and what is the availability of different actors, leaders, right, that may actually open up that conversation. But sometimes it may also imply, right, like that you need specific allies, people that are trying to push the envelope from within that administration or from within private sector. Yeah, and that could be difficult itself, even sometimes even to palate. Okay, so I'm gonna continue, right? Like, so we can just finish up in time, right? But let me see. I hope this isn't froze. So the point is that you guys, you participants, right, throughout this course, have been bringing a lot of ideas, have shared your experiences and your work in your respective countries or areas of work, right? So what we did also is that we have been out there, as you know, and as I mentioned before, we have been trying to push these conversations in other places too, right? And in this way, we have been able to learn about amazing experiences of people and organizations and groups of organizations that is not that they took and say, oh, we're going to have a strategy based on positioning approach to the world. No, no. It's the same way as, for example, right? Like Yuan Yuan in her book, she calls this improvisation process in China. It's not that the leaders in China call it like that, or like decided to do it because they were thinking on what is the strategy process that we're going to have, right? Like we have been seeing these trends, these ways of organizing things. Then we assign the names, right? Like that's what typically happens. And it doesn't mean that we are proposing you a blueprint of how to specifically do this. The whole point is that this should help you find your way rather than follow this blueprint. Otherwise, we're following the same problems and challenges, right, and limitations of the past. Like we humans, we know that we live in complex environments, and yet we always strive and look for simplicity. And that is very human. That is actually very normal. The point is that is it the right approach, right? Like, and at least we need to ask ourselves those questions. So we saw examples like Asivikelane, for example, in South Africa, right? Like this idea where, well, you may have like state indifference on a series of concrete challenges at the local level, right? Like, but then like the organized community is able, right? Like through very simple tools, including like cell phones, track their realities, right? Like it's not about complaining, right? It's basically a permanent community observatory, right? Like, and then how is that data being transformed, right, into metrics, right? Like, and then the mechanisms to force the bureaucracy to see the problems and not being able to ignore it. Okay. In Peru, when we had the session on Peru, I was in Lima, right? Like, and I didn't introduce him by his role at the moment. I guess I can discuss it like that. Dario, he was the country director of Newmont Mining Company, and he had just moved to a regional role, right? Like working on a social engagement, right, at the regional level in the Americas for Newmont, right? Like, and if you remember that, like the man is extremely down to earth, very open, very generous, right, in his time. And I can say this because now I know him more and all, and he has very clear ideas, right? Like, and his message was, we should not be afraid. We should not be afraid of reaching out, of understanding what people want beyond like the leader engagement, right? Like we cannot just stay with the old models, right? In the way that corporate engage with communities, right? We have to acknowledge that there's a history of like serious mistakes that have been done. Right? Like, his perspective is not like the one of a businessman. His perspective is very much the one of an engineer, because that's what he is, right? Like, and now he's in a position in which he tries also to bring about change. But still, right, like you are also limited by the structures of your profession, of your sector, right? He himself needs allies, right? Like may need like people that can actually open up conversations in places where the perspectives are still too entrenched, right? Like we learn from Mario Guapaya and Andean Link Engagement, for example, right? In the work that is focused, that they are doing focus on coalitions. And that actually their work was very much inspired on our work originally in the region of Moquegua, right? So then they started to take it over and do it in other places, for example, in the country. Like I have to mention him also because I'm very like not proud, but like, yes, proud, but also thankful, right? Like that, like an approach that we were bringing, right? Like with a lot of questions and just saying like, what if we did it this way, right? Like then it's taken by a local new organization, right? And apply it as their strategic approach to things. Like that itself is something that if I have to close my program in a few months, right? Like it's something that I feel that could continue over time. And I'm very thankful for that, right? But then you have other initiatives, including within government in Peru, right? Like during that trip, we didn't get to talk about that in that session, right? Like, but I go to MINEM, for example, the Ministry of Energy and Mines, right? And I talk with this fascinating person, right? Like that was leading this program called Mujeres Mágicas. She has recently been promoted now to vice minister of energy and mines. And many people don't like her there because they know that she's strict, that she's very good, and that actually she's not going to compromise with just anybody, right? Just because. But for example, she has been leading for years this program from the ministry called Mujeres Mágicas, magical women, right? Where local women are trained in technical auditing and financial management, for example, among many other things. The point is like, these are models in which people are trying to look at things differently, right? Like, this is not about asking a mining company for charity, right? This is not your classic corporate social responsibility, right? Like, here is about building a permanent community counterforce, right? That retains economic wealth within the territory. We look at work related to democracy, for example. We have been engaging with ActionAid Zambia, where they truly make the connection and make very real, like the intersection between climate action, for example, and democracy. Climate democracy comes to life. I had an amazing long reunion also with activists. And when I was trying to introduce the concept of governance and climate governance, they got it before I was gonna show up and just say the slide. Like, they made it real in terms of agency, right? Like the people engagement, but based on the fact that they own the process, right? This sense of belonging that we were talking about before. Or, for example, organizations like the Center for Public Impact in the UK, right? In the way that for the last few years, right, they have been experimenting with networks and labs for democracy in Latin America, bringing together different perspectives on the problem, right? Like, we have learned also a lot from them. It is very sad that a few days ago they closed officially that line of work because their strategy has moved in a different direction. But we trust and we hope to be able to help, like keeping many of the results that they have achieved over the years and engage many of those key actors that they have stimulated, inspired during that time. Okay, how is it in the end that we move beyond the idea of like elite panels, right? These VIP rooms or boards and all, that I'm not saying that are not important. They can be part of the solution. They can be very influential, right? But how much are they talking about doing things different, not just influencing the big heads? Okay. So how is it that we're able to launch autonomous democracy labs, right? Like that, where particularly young people occupy public decision-making spaces and force municipal transparency. For example, we are attempting to do that through democracy labs. We're doing two that I mentioned in the past, and we'll have a presentation with the democracy lab leads from different parts of the world in the coming weeks. We'll announce it and we'll share the information with you. One of those labs, for example, is about getting young people into politics, right? Like, and the kind of ecosystem and tools that they are building around this are extremely impressive. We'll share more about that very soon. Or in climate, right? Like, thinking, for example, at that session that Laura was mentioning on Colombia, right? That she liked so much. And thank you, Laura, for that feedback, right? Like, the work that Sepia, Jorge, like, are doing over there. Sepia is Jorge and Carlos, right? Like, these two guys that basically believe in the power of connection, right? Like, and how do we make it, this work on networks and communities, concrete, right? Like, so it tackles concrete solutions. And they are the kind of guys that aren't afraid. They are they have very complementing personalities, and they can go and meet with the minister or the minister office, right, in Colombia, but they also have the capacity, the will, and the interest, the drive to go and reflect and understand what are the concrete challenges that people at the indigenous community level, right, like, they are facing in different parts of Colombia. And they are deeply committed to the issues. Like, they believe in the potential of people, of connecting people to get things done, right? And that's why I absolutely love working with them. But then you have people from outside of Colombia too, like in the Royal Academy of Engineering, right? Like, and they bring these system approaches, but it's not theoretical. It's not just a book. It's not just a beautiful graph, right? Like, but how do we make it real so people start working together at the local level, right? And then over time, Jorge and Carlos like meet with the people from right from the UK, right? Like, and they are able together with others, obviously, right? Like to build this idea of a systems hub in Colombia around climate, right? That keeps things neutral, right? But at the same time, it doesn't ignore politics. So, what is common across all these different things, these different experiences? I have only mentioned a handful of experiences based on what we have observed over the last 4 months. Imagine if we can take this to scale and the kind of experiences that we will be able to not only identify, but that can also inspire others and that can be used actually as columns to build new things that are larger, that are more comprehensive, that are more system oriented, right? But if I have to summarize what seems to be common to all these different experiences, right, is that in many ways, people first took the job, the extra job, right, like that go beyond their own mental structures, their own work, right, and specialization, right, like to try to understand what are the structural blockages of the things. So it is not about building a pipe, but understanding why these pipes have been structurally built to leak over time. Then how is it that you individually and also collectively, right, like are deploying a minimal viable action, right? Like how is it that these different experiences going on around there can actually complement each other, right? Directly or indirectly. How is it that we can make that the sum of the parts, right, like be much larger in any case? And then that third step, right, of establishing a permanent counterforce. Like, I mean, it sounds like negative, right, or confrontational counterforce. But the point is that who owns this process when the project ends? Who is going to continue? Who is going to be Converge Moquegua, for example, that I was telling you about before, right? Like, how continues that conversation and why is it that they feel that belonging and that ownership of the process, which, by the way, should not be taken as granted, right? It's not going to last forever. I hope that it lasts forever, but it probably won't. Okay? So what is the sauce? What is the connection, the secret sauce? Yes. Remind me, an old colleague. Key question here, guys, is we need to find the others. We need to redesign the system, of course, but we cannot do it by ourselves. How is it that we find the others? The people that are looking at the same issues like us, the people that are not simply going to conform, right? Like with the idea that we just need to do things based on what we are supposed to do, and that's it. Who is going to go the extra mile, right? Like, I mean, like in environments of competition, right? Like, there is always the question of, well, we're small, we're large, we're people that were already receiving funding, we're competing with all these different other organizations. And that may actually make us afraid to collaborate, to work with others. But one of the things that, while like in this competition, people are just trying to get and show their worth in their work, right? And how their work is better than others, right? Like one thing that is typically missing is the taking responsibility part. Is the saying, I or my organization or my group, right, is gonna commit to do this, right? And we're gonna take this part of the system. We're gonna take this part of the problem. But we cannot do it alone. We need you also. But the different point there is that the side on taking responsibility for something, right, like is usually up for grabs. It is a very bad example, but it's coming to mind, so I'm gonna say it. Okay. I did not need to give this course. We are not making money, or it's not in our project definition to give an international course on rethinking reclaiming development. But we think that it's important to ask these questions and have these discussions in different rooms around the world. What happens after this will depend on us and will depend on you too. And we hope that this course, these sessions, with all the limitations of this structure, right, which I'm going to be the first one to acknowledge, right, with all the challenges of precisely not being able to secure the right time, or having to postpone a couple of classes for different reasons, because typically we are in the move, right? I want you to know that despite all those problems, we did this as a team with Ale, with Tracy, with Leah, right? Like, because we believe that it's important, because we need more conversations like this, and we want you to drive conversations like this in your countries too. Or if you are connected and you work at the World Bank, at the IMF, you are a former USAID, right? Like, we want you to drive these conversations. Take them, disagree with them, right? We don't need to agree with them, right? But we believe that is important. So the pipeline is moving, right? Our next stop is Peru. We're going to be working with the Perú Te Quiero Collective, wonderful people over there who have a network of thousands of people in Peru, young people interested in driving changes to rethinking democracy, right? And we're going to have a conclave with 160 of them in mid-July, right? And we're going to have a whole period of, I guess, 4 hours to work with them on strategies about the future. This is going to go a couple of weeks, a few weeks after, a month later, a month after the runoff election in Peru, which has very much polarized the country along different lines, not ideological, even geographical, very much. We are in conversations also to take this work also in Bangladesh. We haven't defined anything, but we hope to be able to work with some people in Bangladesh, potentially something regional or sub-regional with Nepal and Sri Lanka. We're very interested. If you have some ideas, please, or you know people over there, please reach out to us. Philippines is still on the list, although we had to postpone that work, at least for now. We're interested in other engagements. We're going to be working also with OGP, the Open Government Partnership, right, and the Youth Collective. We're looking at concrete ways in which we can collaborate with them. If you have other ideas, other suggestions, other things that can change, move the needle, we're very happy to discuss it. We invite you to explore this true new identity as an architect, right? A system architect of a more just world. So concretely, as I mentioned before, right, like you will, as somebody that has registered for this course, regardless if you have been to 1, 0, or all the sessions, all right, you will receive an invitation to join the Governance Action Hub portal. You are already a Governance Explorer Network member when you sign up for this course, okay? But what we're going to invite you is based on your answers. If you provided answers on interest, on expertise, right, and on the things that you could give to a community, okay, mentorship and many other things, right? Like you're going to receive an invitation to join a conversation, right, based on your answers, right? Like what is the theme that that is of interest, and then in that small group that is going to have its own virtual space, right, with a login and all, you will be able to connect with other people from around the world that are looking at the same issues as you. There will be challenges, guys. This is not perfect, okay? We're going to have language barriers. We're going to have age, generational barriers. We're going to have tons of challenges. And yet, we know that we're going to have tons of challenges, and yet we're going to try it. Of these many groups, okay, chances are maybe 10%, maybe 5% of the groups survive, right? And we will be very happy to work with those groups. The point is, we would like to generate some incentives. So collectively, people start discussing new approaches or ways to approach in a country or in a region, right? A particular problem. That solution to a problem validated or discussed by the group, maybe potentially by somebody external that can provide additional resources or connections or ideas, right? And then we want to find ways with you to generate some resources or to assign some resources to that so you can explore it a bit further. That's basically the accelerator model of the Governance Action Hub, and that's where we started today. Okay, the idea of these labs, right? These groups, let's call them labs, right? Like that can be on different topics. Extraction lab, climate lab, democracy. These are just examples. Okay, is that they are through collaboration engines, right? Not just an intranet, not a passive intranet, not just another linking, okay? Because these are built around concrete problems, concrete challenges that need to be solved. Now, you may be able to collaborate in the beginning and then not. The whole point is to promote in these groups asynchronous collaboration. Each group will have a dedicated Miro board. Right? You will receive notifications when other members of the group have contributed to the idea that is being shaped, right? And then you decide based on your agenda, your time, right? Your availability. I enter and check and maybe contribute with another idea or comment, right? You will have also, for that particular problem, we are going to experiment with toolkits, some ideas of things that can actually help you explore that particular idea. And again, we'll start maybe with, I don't know, 10, 12, like shape. You decide if you sign up, right? If you don't sign up, right, like the group doesn't exist in the end. But again, we will work with the groups that we can, right? Like, and that are interested. And there is a critical mass of people, right, that would like to continue the conversation. And we'll work with those. This is, again, an exploration. I don't know if this is going to work. I have no idea. And that's the point, right? Like, but we're trying something different. We have heard about the difficulty of engaging with others, right? Like, even in your own country for communication reasons. And certainly, right? Like, sadly, right? Like, we will not have in these groups the ability of maybe connecting community leaders of indigenous communities in Colombia, potentially. But what is interesting is that we do have other mechanisms, right? Like more mixed methods, kind of, right? Like that allow us to engage. We have the communities in Moquegua and Cajamarca, for example, in Peru. We have the engagement in Colombia that we're doing around climate energy transition, right? And climate action with communities in a couple of departamentos in Colombia. So the point is like how even that work at the grassroots level can connect with these discussions, which are potentially that are online, mainly online, and are between different countries potentially. Okay, I see Anurada's raising her hand. I'm just gonna wrap up and then I'm gonna leave it the last 5 minutes for questions and reactions, Anurada. Just give me 1 minute. I'm about to finish. So, what's the end game here? Okay, what is next? Yeah, told you Peru, maybe Bangladesh, most likely the Philippines, right? Like everywhere where we go, we're going to be generating these conversations. We just had one in Morocco, two, I was mentioning, with think tanks, one on climate and another one with students, graduate students at the School of Collective Intelligence, right? We'll have the one in Peru, right? Like in July. We received interest of doing a more in-depth one around issues of democracy in Colombia too. We may, right? The point is that your opinions, your feedback during this course, all your engagement, the results of these co-creation sessions in Zambia, Morocco, etc., right? We are synthesizing them. The same way that we use them to generate a bit of a flavor for this presentation, right? What we have been learning from around the world, we will synthesize them in an overarching report. That report at the end of the year is going to be our contribution to the field. If you contributed to that report, and there will be opportunities to contribute to that report, you will be acknowledged as a co-author of that particular section of the report. Okay, because we want this not to be our voice, but we want this to be the voice of people working in development out there and trying to do things differently. So here's my invocation, okay? I don't have to tell you this, you know it. You probably joined this course because you stopped a long time ago believing on silver bullets, okay? But here, what we're going to be looking at is how to fix the plumbing. Remember that story that I told you about Esther Duflo? Okay? So we're going to fix the plumbing, okay? We understand that systems are not machines. They are shaped by human choices. They are maintained by human behavior, human habits, right? That cynicism, right, that tells us that institutions cannot be reformed is a choice. And it's a choice that is human, normal, because we're disappointed, because we're tired, because we have been born, okay? But I invoke you, right, as somebody that is old, right, and has been working on this for a while, that has been born, that has been disappointed and all, right? Like, reject that passive role. You are not a compliance manager, or you don't need to only be that. You can be much more. You can be an architect. Map the returns on the status quo. Understand why is it that is so difficult to move in the end. Because in the end it is because somebody is probably benefiting of it. Right? And insist in structural durability. Let's not settle for the success of a mirage of a particular project. My invocation in any case, and I wanted to put it out there in a slide, right? Like, is that you do not need and you should not wait for permission to do this. You can take these steps within your own means, within your own time, right? Within your own space, okay? We saw that this is not about find like the coalition first and then start doing work. No, start doing work with what you control. Show what is possible, okay? But also find the others, right? Step into this new identity as system architect. I am extremely thankful for your time, for your engagement, for your commitment, for your interest, for your questions. I had no idea where this course was going to take us. We changed it in the beginning, right? Preferred it was going to be an integrated with the University of Maryland, the course I teach over there. Then it was very difficult. We had to cut it and separate it. You still stayed. I have nothing by gratitude to you in this sense. So this is over, but if you can stay a few extra minutes, I'm very happy to take some questions or comments or suggestions looking at the future. I'm going to go with Anuradha first. Thank you, Anuradha.
Oh, hi, Maria. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, don't mind my voice. I'm not quite feeling well. So, my questions are, I think one of the questions you just answered them exactly the time I was putting in my hand. It was concerning that, this particular cohort had two major specializations. One is looking at projects in terms of democracy, and another is climate. So you also mentioned about the publication or any scholarly, contribution towards that. So I wanted to know, you of course answered it partially. I wanted to know when is around when or before when should this be sent and in what format? That is one. Secondly, there are a few things that don't fit into either of the topics. I think I mentioned few in few of the classes also, like the state capture, minimum government, and maximum governance. Looking at governance indices and those kind of things, like for example, mm, looking at aspects related to accountability and transparency. So you also spoke about social audits. You asked for the India experience. So I've written elaborately on this. I've not made 100% effort to put in a very qualitative this thing. I just want to take just a few more days. But I wanted to know, how does that fit in? Should I just mail it across to you and your office and you look into how we can work further into it and take it in a different form apart from these two? That's my first question to you.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a bit indifferent. I mean, like, if you prefer to just send it to me, because the point is it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? And it will not be perfect. I don't even know if the
No,
format that I'm going to propose to
okay,
you.
just one moment, please. I
Sure,
think
sure.
I understood that you mentioned either in democracy or climate change. I worked on both actually. I worked on the democracy deliberative democracy and other forms of democracy in India compared to the rest of the world. And also the climate aspects. I'm working on the wicked problems of climate change and how in reality, there are some classic examples of wicked problems and how governments should and international organizations and the civil society should work very cooperatively to put up wicked problems dealt in a different manner, not just about effective governance. It involves a lot of things. So it will be useful for you as an institution itself. But
Yeah.
I wanted to start somewhere to put it something like a brief or maybe like a working research, writing. It can be co-written by us. That's okay. I wanted to just share it in the way that I wanted to contribute it to you, and you can add your perspective, so we can co-author about it. And then we can slowly translate it into a project that will be useful to a particular stakeholder or a group of stakeholders. That's fine. I'm asking as to when exactly do you want us to send the climate and democracy related submissions first, because that's related to the cloud, right? So that is my first question. Second is about in what format do you want the other ones? Like any length is fine, because all my writings are very lengthy. I was a little bit not feeling good to send such lengthy writings across. So
Yeah, honestly, whatever works better for you and is easier to submit. I mean, like, if you send me 100 pages, clearly I'm gonna be like slower to actually like give you
no.
feedback.
It's not 100. It's around 20, 15 to 20 sheets. That's
Sure.
it.
I'm exaggerating, but that's the point, right? Like, so don't worry about that,
No,
number
it's
one.
reflecting upon my experience and also the contemporary developments. It's not
Yeah,
rhetorics, definitely.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. No,
it's
no, no.
about that.
I appreciate it very much, and I will read it with tons of interest. In terms of like priorities of the topics, I mean, like, no, I don't mean it. Look, even democracy and climate, right, are very large umbrellas. For example, right, like the way that we approach territorial development in Peru, right, like
Mhm.
we put it under the democracy umbrella. Why?
Yeah,
Because we
correct.
talk about democracy like in the sense of agency, of belonging, of being part of processes, right? Like so,
Mhm.
and that is the entry point into the way that we approach territorial development. But it's like we can say something similar also in the way that we approach climate and the way that we approach health and education, for example, right? We have
Yeah,
been
correct.
using examples from education, even during this class and in the class at Maryland, for example,
Yeah,
because
correct.
even the sector work, right, or technology, right, and why is it that we use innovation? As you mentioned, right, like in this session, I had to exclude things. I haven't talked about innovation. We did the work on innovation. We talk about the state capturing corruption, right? Like all those are like things that can be easily embedded as challenges, right? Like within this. Is it that we are, which could be the case, right? Like, are we discussing state capture in a context of democratic governance, right? Or are we
Yeah,
discussing state capture and anti-corruption in the context of public services, for example, right? Like
okay.
whatever, bureaucracy, etc. So it's like, I mean, that may change a little bit the approach, right? But we are very open because what we care more about even for the questions of the exam, right? Like for the exam or the questionnaire, is for you to be able to put, this is the problem that bothers me, that I'm committed to solving, that I'm struggling with, right? And
Yeah,
then that what we provide in that sense is like a structured way to approach the
yeah.
problem, right? Like
Mhm.
using many of the concepts of the course. But again, for follow up, for discussion, other potential projects, maybe a problem that you want to bring under one of these groups, right? And so
Yeah, correct.
we don't limit ourselves thematically or specifically because we know that these are very large umbrellas.
Okay, yeah. So my next question is a very small thing. I know that you mentioned about the but I sent you a mail because I was a little bit concerned that I was looking at an email which I may have deleted by mistake or maybe it got lost in the spam. But unfortunately, your office did not reply to me, which Alexandra just clarified that it has not been sent yet. So is it compulsory that we need to take only the quiz, or can we do something else that's more, more different or more, like a detailed form, or is it like mandatory that we need to take the quiz one?
And the last part of your, or like the second part of your intervention, it was coding. So I'm not sure what the question is. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. No, I'm just asking a very simple question. She said that the quiz has not been sent, which many of us asked her about the same. So if it has not been sent, I'm asking, because previously I think you mentioned you can either take with a quiz or you can get it by participation. But I'm thinking I want to write a qualitative assignment that is more
Okay. Got
symbolic.
it.
I mean, I
Got it.
can take the quiz. I'm not saying that I will evade the quiz, but I
Yeah,
thought
no.
writing an assignment, say, I want to reflect upon the industrial policy, the new
Yeah.
industrial policy of the World Bank. I want to write a big epilogue on it. And I
Okay.
wanted to analyze, I wanted to do the policy analysis. So I wanted to take your remarks. Of course, I will get the certificate definitely. But then
Yeah.
I wanted to make a mark there to say, how does one look at, see, when we are in practice, I teach parliamentarians, I sometimes
Look,
teach civil servants. But
to
I
be,
think when we come to a class like this, it's very important to know how we apply theories and philosophy differently to something that's in development. So I want to make use of that. So I'm asking, can we do this?
Yes, I guess that the shortest answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just I'm using your question only to clarify something too, right? Like,
Yeah.
Number one, for example, you and Urada, right? I guess that for what I remember, you have been to all the sessions, if maybe one that you may have not been, okay? Like,
Yeah.
so the people that have been consistently through this, right? Like, originally we thought you don't need to actually take the assessment, right? Like, and so because you have been already through all this, right? Like, but we know that there's people that are taking a lot of looking at the videos, right, and following in a different format because of the time difference. We want to be fair.
Yeah, correct.
We're trying to like propose an assignment that is useful to you regardless, right? Because in the end, honestly, like I know that certificates are important, especially if you dedicate the time, but I mean, like, if I may undermine myself, right? Like, but the certificate is really not important. The important thing is like, can you actually use this, right? Like, so what this will allow you or anybody that wants to take it also, right? Like, for one, it allows us to assess your commitment and interest, right, on this, right, moving forward. But second, and more importantly, right, like hopefully it will be a way for you to like apply this to your specific situation, which I don't necessarily know, right? Like I'm talking about everybody. Maybe I know about you much more than many of the students in the course. But hopefully it will be useful, right? Like, so it gives you a bit of a taste and it motivates you and makes you interested also of joining the virtual groups over time. I guess it's more about that, right? In that sense. So hopefully it is useful and it helps us just to assess also that interest, that commitment, and just that. But it's not about, I'm actually not gonna deliver grades in the sense of like A, right? Or B or C, right? Like, no. It's more about for you an opportunity to try to apply this, and in the truth, like, it's gonna be imperfect.
Yeah, Mario, I just wanted to add, please do not take that. I just wanted to raise the bar a little bit because I know it will be really easy for someone like them to achieve. I really look forward to it. I was looking into my emails, but then I thought I was looking for an opportunity to write something that, you can put remarks, maybe we can read co-write with a couple of your colleagues. And I'm just trying to make it bit beyond. I will take the quiz. I'm not saying that I will not take the quiz. I definitely look forward to the quiz. But I wanted to add another thing as part of the assessment so that I get qualitative remarks that can be useful. It's very rare that we sit in a class. I'm used to teaching people and sometimes we get webinars. And this is something which I really enjoyed because I do not have to prepare. I'm reflecting and I'm also learning along. That's very important. So I am taking this as an opportunity, just being in this ecosystem. So that's the point. So I'm sure all this is very useful. I will take the quiz. I will put in all my qualitative efforts. I will make the entire thing look 100% complete, not for the intent of putting a tick mark, but willingly and happily. But I just wanted to add this, say you can evaluate even my submission. So I'm taking back something that I want to put as my work that begins from here. That's very new. So
I'm extremely thankful. Thank you, Anurada. Much, much
thank you
appreciated.
very much. Thank you very much to all your colleagues and you too.
Thank you. And guys, I mean, like, I'm extremely thankful again for all this, for your time, for your company over these past few months. I truly hope that this is helpful over time. If you have questions, please reach out. We are doing follow-up conversations also with people. We'll propose like some spaces for collaboration over time. But well, we are gonna, it's 10:40. We're just gonna stop it there now. Thank you again. Please reach out, send us questions, doubts, disagree with us, right? We don't have all the answers. Alessandra, again, thank you very much for your company and helping us over there. So for the last time, I'm gonna say, class dismiss. So we'll see you around. Have a great time, great summer, winter, wherever you are. Good night, good day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.